I moved out to this part of Montreal in 1956. And at that time we would go to church in the French church in St. Genevieve Village. But as our numbers grew, more English people moved in, we wanted to have a Mass in English.
My first letter is dated June 22nd, 1959 to Cardinal Leger, and it was a petition we had put through St. Genevieve, Ile-Bizarre, Pierrefonds, and Roxburgh region for the purpose of obtaining an English-speaking parish to fulfill our spiritual needs.
The only way we could get help from the Archdiocese with funds would be if the church would be bilingual. We had different ideas of what we wanted to do, and we wanted to keep it entirely English. So that meant we had to have enough families to be able to support the church.
We moved out here in 1959. We just moved the furniture into the house and sort of sat down, and it was a knock on the door. Paul Nantel came along saying, "We want to sign a petition to get a parish here."
As a result, in August, we wrote a letter to Father Bastien, who was the parish priest in the French church down in St. Genevieve. And in there, we'd given a detail of the English-speaking Catholics that we found in our canvas. We called them souls, and total souls was 645, for a total of 176 families.
And he gave us a room in the basement of that church that we could use. So a group of us went in and we whitewashed the walls. We just had chairs, somewhere a table. But I do know I brought a tablecloth from home to use as an altar cloth. And Father Bastien gave us chalice and the vessels that we would need to use. We did have an organ, a small organ, which was given to us by the Anglican Church with the pedals. And so that was quite an experience.
Father Picard was the first priest that was sent to us.
When we outgrew the basement, we moved into École Saint-Gérard. At that time, Pierrefonds Boulevard didn't exist, the police station didn't exist. Camille Florist was a little place on Gouin, and then the École Saint-Gérard is really a school in the middle of the field. Robert Picard was replaced soon by Father Fauché. He suggested that the English-speaking Catholics of the St. Genevieve Parish form a council to do the warden's jobs. So that we could manage our own affairs, Father Fauché met with Father Bastien, and a meeting was arranged with the wardens of St. Genevieve Parish, and the upshot of it was that if we could maintain a contribution to St. Genevieve of $85 a week, we'd keep everything that was above that, which we did. 2 weeks after this arrangement was made, I can remember our collection was up to $125. This is back in the early 60s. This money was worth a little more. And it grew incessantly ever since. And we built up a bank account towards the future. Jim Pearson and I met Father Bastien.
We thought, if we could start collecting money and buy the land, then what choice would the diocese have?
This was illegal because it's against canon law to have money collected in church that didn't go towards the church. But Father Bastien thought that was a great idea, and it also suggested that we don't tell downtown about this, and we thought that was a very good advice.
Tim had a friend who was at college with us, who was a lawyer. He said, well, we can set up a separate corporation, which we did. It was called the English Catholic Church Land Fund for Pierrefonds St. Genevieve, Inc. And we started to collect money for that. We had a second collection after Masses. I think we raised money with help from the different organizations in the parish, CWL, the Men's Club, Couples Club.
The Mass Centers went from St. Gerard School to St. Anne's School up to St. Charles, and then when Wilder Penfield was built, we had a second Mass Center. While at St. Anne's,
We were told we could have a mission. Father Charles Cahill, Father Charlie, came out to be our pastor. He had been chaplain at St. Mary's Hospital for many years.
Father Bastia assumed that he'd be living at the rectory at St. Genevieve. And Father Cahill didn't think that was a very good idea. He continued to live at St. Mary's Hospital until we bought a house for him.
The idea of the land came up. We had managed to look at several lots, and the Laniel brothers on St. Anne Street were Catholic, and they heard that their farm could become a site for a church, and it suited their thinking. We bought 216,000 square feet for it was $86,500. And once we got the lot, then we had a Palm Sunday blitz in April of '66, and each person who bought a lot got a land certificate which said, we buy this lot and at the same time give it to St. Thomas of Becket Parish.
We then raised $12,000 in one day towards our land. This was absolutely unheard of in any other parish, ever.
We had a huge 4x8 picture of the property, and as each lot was sold, we'd fill it in with marking pencils, and eventually got the whole thing covered. We paid it off by April of '68. At that point, we were talking about building the church. I remember at one point we had the slogan, "Let's fabricate in '68." Lloyd Howell, when we were talking about architects, he insisted on John Bird because he had had experience with several architects, and he said, "This is the guy you want." John Bird wasn't Catholic. He came along and gave us a design of a church, which we said, absolutely no, this is not what we wanted. So he said, well, find out what you want. And so we got a meeting of all the parishioners. We called it the TPI meeting, the Total Parish Involvement Meeting. Up to something like 200 people at that meeting.
There were a lot of meetings then about the building and what we'd want and how it would be built and what style.
He didn't give us plans the next time. He said, here, this is what you want. And he had a kind of a schematic drawing. This is what you want to do in the church. He says, okay, if I design a church now that satisfies all these needs, will you accept it? We said, yes. And that's where the design of the church came about. After the architectural plans had been approved and costed, we had a meeting. A number of the parishioners were saying it's too costly, you won't be able to do it for that price.
And they went up to Hull to see one of these churches that is a convertible church, like you can move the benches out into the back of the church and have a dance on a Saturday night and bring the pews back in for masses on Sunday.
And I remember that meeting very well. I was running it, and we presented our views, and then
We held a vote as to what we were going to build, what type of church, and it only carried by 4 votes.
some of the dissenting people complained to the diocese, and so we had to go down and talk to them. And that's when they put a ceiling on the amount we could spend. So we came back with another meeting at which we took the different options, church, hall, and rectory, church and hall only, church and rectory only, church only, and got costing on all of those. Father Cahill was away when the meeting was called, and actually cut his vacation short to preside over it. Father Cahill said, look, don't build the rectory. This would cut us down into the allowable expenditure. Stewart Construction was the firm that built it, and I was involved, a school expansion later where Stewart Construction was involved, and he said, boy, we didn't make any money on that building. So St. Thomas of Becket must have done fairly well with them. Canon Delorme was the priest in charge of temporal affairs, and he actually bet us that we couldn't come in under budget. And I forget what it was that we bet. He was going to buy us a bottle of Irish whiskey, and we had to buy him a bottle of cognac, if depending on who won. We kind of built it under budget by not disclosing everything that we were buying, I think. Actually, we won, and I never saw the Irish whiskey.